times have been tough on everyone financially, especially artists and gig economy workers. Credit Canada is a non-profit credit counseling agency committed to helping you make your debt, and the stress that comes with it, disappear. And they've got a few tricks up their sleeves. Visit creditcanada.com during November's Financial Literacy Month and learn the money management magic tricks you need to shred those overdue bills and get your finances back on track.
Are you stressed over unpaid bills and debts? Do you wish sometimes that the stress can just disappear? Credit Canada can be the magic in your life. We will turn your stress into happiness. Go to creditcanada.com to learn how to live a debt-free, stress-free life. Are you stressed because you have too many credit cards and too much debt? Do you wish to make that stress magically disappear? Credit Canada has the perfect debt solution to make it happen for you. Go to creditcanada.com to learn how to live a debt-free, stress-free life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event tonight. Didn't you just love those magic tricks? I love them. I think they're fascinating. I love magic and I love them. My name is Bruce Sellery. I am the CEO of Credit Canada. I am also the money columnist for CBC Radio, for Cityline, do a bunch of stuff on BNN Bloomberg. I've written some books. I've been around covering personal finance for over 2 decades, I guess now. And it is my great pleasure to invite you to join us for the conversation. It is November, ergo, it is Financial Literacy Month. And our theme for Credit Canada is money magic, making your debt disappear. And we've been having a ton of fun with this whole magic theme because with magic, it really is tricks and techniques that are learned through practice. You develop them through discipline and patience. And that's analogous to money, right? There's lots of tricks, lots of techniques, and those are all developed with patience and practice and discipline. So we are going to focus on some of those tricks and techniques tonight in our conversation about de-stressing your debt, and specifically the top techniques that financial therapists use to help cultivate calm. So there are techniques that you can practice. We're going to focus on all sorts of things, including why this stress exists, who can help you, what they can help you with, and how you can help yourself. We're also going to talk about when is the time. When is the time for you to reach out, pull the fire alarm, call the number to ensure that you get supported in what can be a really, really tough time. And my hunch is that this is a topic that has some resonance and relevance for you because you're here now, unless, of course, you thought you were coming to a bobblehead convention, in which case you are in the wrong place. Okay, so you are going to have questions tonight. I know that you will. And so what you're going to do is on your screen, there's a little box that says questions or a tab. You're going to click that, and then you're going to type your question into that little box. And Tanvi, my colleague Tanvi, is going to send those questions to me. So I'll be able to see them on the screen, and I will integrate them into the conversation as we go along. We'll save a little bit of time for questions towards the end. I also want to say the reason we are here is possible because of the sponsor relationships that we have. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to our platinum sponsor. Our platinum sponsor is Home Equity Bank. They are the provider of the CHIP reverse mortgage. It's something you've probably heard about or seen advertised. Home Equity Bank's focus is empowering Canadian homeowners age 55 plus to live retirement on their terms. And you may not know this, but a lot of seniors deal with some real stress about that because of the challenge that they have in balancing, the needs of today, putting groceries in the fridge with cash flow. And a lot of seniors have significant equity in their house that a reverse mortgage can help them unlock. Okay. So now we're going to introduce our panelists for tonight's event. First, Dr. Moira Somers. She is a financial psychologist. She is a professor and family wealth consultant. She is based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and she is the author of a book called Advice That Sticks: How to Give Financial Advice that People Will Follow. That'd be helpful. She works with financial professionals. She also works directly with clients to address the behavioral and emotional aspects of personal finance. Our second panelist is Paula Allen. She is the Global Leader, Research and Total Wellbeing and Senior Vice President at LifeWorks. So her focus there, overseeing and managing and leading the research agenda at LifeWorks. And she's focused on current issues, but also emerging issues that impact health, productivity, and cost, because we know those challenges are enormous. The costs are enormous, both in monetary terms and societal terms. She has quite a broad scope here. She focuses on well-being in almost all of its forms: social, physical, financial, and mental. And she'll be bringing all that to bear to our conversation tonight. Moira, I want to start with you. You did your doctoral dissertation on procrastination. Now, did you ever hand it in? Did you even defend this paper? Because I
had a nickel for every time I got that.
I know, I'm sure, but it was so easy.
Record time. It was highly motivating, I have to tell you.
I believe it. You knew your funding was going to run out at some point. What is one thing that you learned about procrastination that you would bring to this conversation about financial stress?
It was an incidental finding at the time that turned out to be one of the most important things, which is that people who are high on that proclivity to delay things often don't have systems in place. They didn't have basic reminders like a watch. This was before the day of smartphones or whatever. But just not having good systems in place made a big difference.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's a lot of parallels with the financial world as well.
Now, Paula, your graduate degree was in psychometry, which in the art and science of psychology, it's kind of the science, right? Like there's a real numeric grounding in that particular part of the broader discipline.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it like that, but the starting point for everything is understanding. And with psychometry, we're just measuring. You're looking at how people relate to the world, how they process information, some of the wonderful uniquenesses between people. But it is both an art and science to really problem solve. So I am a little bit more on the science end, but the whole spectrum is important.
Well, speaking of spectrum, for our listeners, hello listeners or viewers, you're probably on a spectrum here in terms of the gravity of your debt situation and your feelings towards and your stress level about your debt situation. So for some of you, it's like aspirin territory in terms of the pain. And for some of you, it is morphine territory. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a fair spectrum of both circumstances and people's relationship to those circumstances that have joined us for this virtual event. All that said, we will be playful and we will have a lovely time. And we will do that because that's, how we're going to gather. But I want you to know that if you're on the morphine end we have a great deal of empathy and concern for whatever it is that you're dealing with. Now, we are going to talk about the techniques. I promise you, we are going to talk about the techniques. We're going to talk about very specific self-care ideas, but I want to get the obvious ones. So if you've got financial stress, you can have music. You can read about destinations maybe one day you could afford to travel to. You could read self-help books. I love this one. It's called Solve for Happy. You could be a journaler. You could write all your thoughts down in a book. You could probably burn some incense, maybe take a bath. This is coconut butter scrub. I don't know. I haven't tried it, but it sounds amazing. You could also go to Comfort from Your Past. This is Curious George. It's my little stuffy. And then I've never shown this to anyone else other than my family. This is my binky from when I was a child. You're going to be horrified. Want to see it? You ready to see it? It's so embarrassing. Isn't that amazing? This is One Love, but even just one moment with it at my cheek and I feel calm. Again, I'm so glad to have that. I do want to begin. I mean, we're going to talk in all seriousness about self-care and other strategies that people can use. You cannot have my binky because it's mine. But Paula, before we do that, I want to ask you to characterize the world as you see it today, because you do have a particularly powerful vantage point, given the data, given the tens of thousands of people who connect to LifeWorks in lots of different ways over the course of time. You and I did an event. I hosted this event on April the 2nd, 2020. So this is like, 2.5 weeks after the pandemic officially begun in Canada. It was called Happiness in Times of Crisis. And it was just quite the time. How would you characterize the environment that we find ourselves in today?
Now, well, actually, you brought me back to April of 2020. That was quite a time. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of speak about how we were then and how we progressed now. Because if you remember it, everybody was in a bit of a shock situation. I mean, we're thinking about dystopian images. If you remember all the commercials, they were all in black and white and everybody was here for everybody else, which was nice. It was wonderful, but we were really in a high anxiety place. And what we saw, and when I say what we saw, we have a mental health index that actually tracks what's happening over time in the population, the Canadian working population in particular. And many of us have heard about the burnout and really just general emotional exhaustion. All the change, all the upheaval, all of that took its toll on us. Now we're in a really interesting place. And it's a pretty precarious place. We're seeing the people are a little bit more on edge. So just, responding to things that maybe didn't stress them out before, and it's maybe stressing them out. We've seen that some relationships have actually suffered, work relationships, personal relationships over the past little time, and a little bit more isolation is coming up in our findings. So I really think this is the time to kind of take hold and make sure that you're investing in your own self-care.
As you were speaking there, I felt myself take a deep inhale of breath. It was like this reminder, like, oh, is this what breathing it? Good to know. Good reminder. Good to know. Moira, people have studied stress for generations in lots of facets. What would you say is the purpose of stress? Like, what context could you provide for this physiological and psychological experience that we have that is often connected to the level of debt that we carry?
There's, as you can imagine, all kinds of psychological differences in how people approach this and conceptualize it even. But at its basis, it's this constellation of physical and emotional and cognitive reactions that set in when we believe that the resources we have are not sufficient to meet the demands on us. And so, of course, finances come into that. What we know is that when people are experiencing that stress, that they tend to do a couple of things quite predictably. And one is to kind of hyper-focus on the problem. They rally all of their resources in an effort to solve the problem. And in general, the brain is exquisitely well designed to do that in the short run. The problem is the long run. The problem is chronic stress without recovery. That's what we know is not good for us in any dimension. That's what leads to burnout. That's what leads to errors. That's what leads to relationship distress.
Paula, I want to work in some of the broader elements as we think about this holistically, because debt stress, of course, isn't just one thing, and it isn't just the dollars that are glaring out at us from that credit card statement. It could be work stress that leads to marital strife, that leads to a separation, that leads to increased living expenses, that leads to an increase in the level of debt that we have. Yeah. What would you say about the intersectionality, to use the word of the day, or the interaction of all these other root causes or all these other factors that people can be dealing with?
Well, number one, it's life, and it's us as human beings. You know, you can't really segment any part of who you are or your experience. And things change in your situation that might change something else. But I think one of the most important connections is that connection between mental health and financial well-being. When we were looking at our data, the biggest driver about whether people did well or better through this pandemic from a mental health point of view, as opposed to worse, was actually the presence of some emergency savings. And it didn't have to be a lot. And it wasn't correlated with income. Just having that cushion gave you a sense of control, gave you a sense of contingency. So having that small emergency savings actually made a difference in terms of how resilient you were throughout this period of upheaval.
It's very interesting. Moira, in terms of the people that you connect with, they're at lots of different levels of income and stability, and many of the stresses, I'm sure, are quite similar regardless of how much money people make. But I want to ask you how, as a psychologist, you ensure or at least increase the probability that you're going to address the root cause, because a massage is lovely. It is so lovely. Who doesn't love a massage? Massage is great. It's going to mitigate the physiological stress in my shoulders for an hour. But if I haven't got rid of the credit card debt, it's going to be back like that. So how do you get at the root cause?
You know, it's just so highly variable, Bruce, from situation to situation. And frankly, it can be a problem. You know, in the alcohol and drug recovery world, there's an expression, sometimes people are called a dry drunk, which refers to somebody who's stopped drinking but has not dealt with his stuff. And you can get that same kind of phenomenon with people who are really determined that they are going to pay off their debt, and they often throw everything they have at the debt in a really unthoughtful way or an unplannedful way, only to find themselves right back there in fairly short order. And, you know, we call that the debt cycle for a reason. So getting to the root causes involves doing this really scary thing, no matter whether you're dealing with a substance abuse problem or a debt problem, or even an unrelated marital or parenting issue. And that first thing is telling the truth. You know, being willing to acknowledge what's going on, acknowledge your feelings about it, and just without shame or blame or judgment, be able to say, this is what's going on, I think.
What would be a couple of examples of how that truth might sound as it is falling out of the mouth of someone who was willing to ask that question and be vulnerable in communicating?
Well, just today, I had somebody who had to tell the truth with a huge sense of horror when she realized that she was the victim of a fraudster.
Right. And would her truth, if you were to go even deeper to what that truth was, would it be something about her, or that she told herself, or something that she might have an easier time admitting that she was the victim of a fraudster, but it might have said something else in her mind about her or how she carries herself in the world.
Sometimes it's just enough to know that something is true and worry about the why it's true. Later on, that emerges when you are in that state of just being gobsmacked or horrified. You don't even have full access to it. So that's one example. Another example of getting at the root of things might be to actually consider the possibility that your spouse might be right, that you might.
Excuse what? Huh? Sorry, you just cut out there. I don't know what happened. Not in my case. You mean spouse might be right, except in my case.
Except Bruce.
That's yeah. My husband may never see this tape. This must be our secret. Really? So I love this. This is so great. So our human drive to be right could have a connection to the level of financial stress that we feel.
And just like the procrastination scenario that we described at the top of the show, it's really easy for us to go financially unconscious. It's not like we're dragging our chickens and goats and eggs to bartering sessions anymore. When's the last time anybody on this call touched cash, for example? And the further we get from the actual, physicality of these resources that we need to sustain our life, the easier it is to just lose track of it. It just doesn't have the sense of reality. The more physically distant we get from money. And the fact is, there's $1 billion advertising industry out there that exists to part us from our money. We are outgunned and outnumbered in so many ways. And so finding ways to stay conscious with the stuff that we can control and mind how money's flowing in and out of our life.
Now, Moira, I referenced in the title for this session, financial therapists, which is actually a thing, principally in the US. The designation is a thing in the US. But, any therapist in practice would be dealing with all sorts of things with money as a thread to pull on. I want to ask you about, and this is a broad question, but for those people who don't have much exposure to the caring professions, what is the simplest way you could describe the different either roles or approaches that different therapists could use? And I know that's a massive question and people could write a whole book on it, but what's Gestalt versus CBT, for example?
Let me first do a little bit of consumer protection, which is that there are a lot of therapists out there who have money issues themselves, who've got money prejudices, who are what we call money monks. They reject money, that are in the helping profession and they think money is tainted. Or there are people out there who think that they're all that and they don't have much compassion for people who are struggling or who don't understand some of the intersectionality of these things, the way that life kind of piles up on you. So whoever it is that you approach, you need to pay attention to is this person providing a welcoming space in which I can tell the truth and in which we can unpack things. But yeah, Bruce, there's so many different approaches. There's the credit counseling approach. And I know many credit counselors who are they are superb at dealing not only with the figures, but also with the emotions. You have therapists out there they're actually called financial recovery counselors, and they very much deal with this like it's any other kind of addiction model. There are people who specialize in couples work with, the marital dynamic around money conflicts and what that means in terms of control and attachment or intimacy. So there's just many different.
So many. And if you were to Google it, you'd find probably, I don't know, 50 million entries. I'm seeing some questions related to the spousal dynamic, and we'll get to them in a second. Paula, I want to ask you, what wisdom would you have on client practitioner fit? Because, and then why this is in my head is I was talking to someone recently about a real anxiety issue that he was dealing with. And he said, I went to someone, it didn't go well, and he never went to anybody else. And of course, my point was try again until you find someone you connect to. What's the alchemy of that? How do you know if you've got the fit? What questions do you ask?
Well, there's a couple of things. And what I wanted to do as well, just to sort of begin answering the question by building on something that you meant before, which is the need to be honest. And I think it's quite significant, the amount of stigma people feel when they have financial issues. We did some work at LifeWorks, just sort of, surveying, what is preventing you from doing X, and that X is, gaining financial knowledge or reaching out for support or whatever. And one of the number one things was really just embarrassment, people feeling that they should have known or they should have done, and not realizing that a good proportion of the population is in the same situation. And it is just a matter of taking that first step. So I do think we need to be honest as a society that this is ridiculous, like having this kind of stigma, just like it's ridiculous to have mental health stigma. And I also want to be realistic that it is still there, even as much as I'm saying it shouldn't. So you need to make sure that you have a connection with someone who you feel comfortable with. You need to make sure that you have a connection with somebody who is listening to you and not making assumptions. So we talked earlier about psychometry and the art and science of problem solving. No one can help you unless they understand what's going on with you. I do think it's important to have the checklist of qualifications, but you are in a problem solving relationship. You are in a relationship that is intended to be life-changing in a positive way. So just that gut feeling that somebody is going to take you in the right place is very important. And also the respect that they show you in terms of explaining clearly what needs to happen and what alternatives you have. I do get a little bit nervous when people have like to-do lists and they don't actually bring me along in that journey, because I really wonder, is this something that I can trust? But also, is this something that I can feel comfortable taking as part of the wisdom I take away from the relationship, even after I stop the conversations with them?
Moira, we're going to talk about things that people can do at home, on their own, or with their spouse or with their family. But I want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the things that a practitioner could do. I know that they approach it from different perspectives, but what would you say some of the techniques would be that a practitioner could apply to dealing with debt stress?
Well, there's some very behavioral ones, like for somebody whose anxiety about money is so high that they can't even bring themselves to open their bank statements or go online. There may be some work to help people approach that, just like you would work with a spider phobia. Eventually, you got to look at a spider.
Is this like exposure training?
It is a little bit. It is a little bit like that. Sometimes it's a competency building model where you're looking at almost, financial literacy. What do these things mean? And what are your options? What are your rights? And then often there is an approach, financial literacy alone really doesn't solve a whole heck of a lot, because what you also have to combine that with is emotional intelligence and awareness and insight. So finding out what is your very personal journey with money. Do you have frank money trauma? Are your earliest memories of money, do they involve friction? Do they involve violence? Do they involve exploitation? Have you been victimized yourself? So like I said, there's just there's so many different ways that people can come to be struggling in their relationship with money. But The good news is that if you can look at the numbers in particular,
yeah,
the other stuff tends to make itself apparent very quickly.
Yeah. I'm going to start weaving in some of the questions because they're really great. And I think they give us an insight into what people are thinking about and what they're dealing with. And maybe Moira, I'll give this first one to you. And I love where it comes from because it begins with the phrase, I have no debt. I have no debt, but I am always stressed about money. There's no amount that is enough. I find myself stressed just about getting in debt. What do I do?
Well, celebrate what you've done to not be in debt and recognize that there are some things that money can do for us that is glorious and that only money can do for us. And there's so much more that it can't do. And one of the things that this person is describing is some of the things that it can't do. There's that awareness that that person has, that there's no amount of money that would feel like enough to actually exhale, suggests that, you know, you might want to turn your attention to other areas, which includes, how is it that you want to sit with uncertainty? Where does your safety really reside? And if it's not within the financial domain, what does that mean? I think that's something that as parents, we work with our children all the time to walk that line between money's super important on the one hand, and money is of absolutely no importance.
Yes.
On the other hand, and
yes.
There you go. They're both true.
They're both 100% true. If I were to bring back the earlier comment, Moira, that you made about the truth, it sounds like this question is kind of wrapped in a bouquet of fear. What would be a question or two that you would ask the person who asked this question to help find what that is?
Oh, Paula, let's do this one together. I mean, part of it is, what does the opposite of that look like?
Yeah, and I would also even, I mean, there's a couple of ways, like understanding where that fear comes from, because it could come from a number of different places. It could come from, you know, the responses that you learned growing up. It could come from what you've observed. It could come from just this feeling of not being safe, just generally speaking, and you're putting a lot of your need for safety on money. But, you know, just even in that point, sometimes it's helpful to step outside of yourself a little bit, you know, and maybe with some help, step outside of yourself a bit. And if the issue is, I need to feel safe, which often it is, I need to feel safe. What does that actually mean? You know, is it the income that you have? Is it the amount of savings that you have? Have someone help you put a realistic level on what you need to be safe. And it'll take a while for you to feel comfortable with that. But then you have to sort of build in some other priorities. Once I am safe, I can play. Once I'm safe, I can address some of the other priorities in life. And I bet you your level of safety is not as massive in terms of the volume of cash as what you might think if you actually don't think it through.
It's great. Okay, this next question, there's two levels at which I find this one interesting. How do you deal with the stress of a spouse who isn't playing their part in reducing the family's debt stress? And what I find interesting about the question is first the question in and of itself. And then the second thing I find interesting about the context, like the untold story about what's happening in that marriage and what the right level of playing their part looks like in the view of the questioner. Because often there's a pretty big delta in spousal relationships about what that looks like in terms of income and tasks. And I mean, it's kind of like who's unloading the dishwasher times 1,000. Moira, why don't I throw that to you? Do you unload the dishwasher, by the way? I unload it, and well, actually, Asher unloads it. I load it because I'm the only one who does it right. And there is a right way, just for the record.
Okay, I lost the question in all of that.
Okay, because I made a dishwasher crack. How do you deal with the stress of a spouse who isn't playing their part in reducing their family's debt stress?
You know, a weird thing happens in marriage, which is that no matter how similar we are to our spouse, we always kind of polarize, you know, he's the saver, no, he's the spender, you know, so one of us is what the other one isn't, no matter how similar we are. As a therapist, what I'm always trying to do is figure out what is it that we can agree on, and have these things ever been discussed and surfaced, in particular the meaning of these things. So one person may be thinking that some level of debt is quite tolerable while we try to live and experience and enjoy our life, knowing that we've got years down the road to fix it. So just trying to surface what is it that the various perspectives are is one thing. And then figuring out what is it that we can agree on. And then the third thing is for each partner, you know, to take 100% responsibility for their 50% of the problem or for their part of the problem, recognizing that in the end, this, you know, the circle that we can control is very, very small. And sometimes people do have to make hard decisions to leave marriages when the financial caregiving is not present.
I'm going to ask you this next question, Paula. We're getting some great questions, by the way. Interestingly, a lot of them are about relationships. This one, I'm just going to read it verbatim. There's a lot in it. My husband doesn't make a cent and hasn't in years. He's a great guy, does the lion's share on the home front. But last week I gave him an ultimatum that I will cut him off from future spending if he doesn't start working. Am I right in thinking that he's a slob? I'm not going to add commentary, but there's a lot. Okay, a little commentary. There's a lot in there. Paula, what would you say about that? It's a question. It's also a comment.
Well, there's a lot in there, and I'm going to put a qualification because we've only had like 30 seconds of the description, so I might be making a lot of assumptions. The first assumption is that he's not working by choice, that it isn't a disability, it isn't a skill market fit, it isn't anything of that sort, that there are opportunities and he's choosing not to work. The other assumption that I'm going to make is that it's putting a lot of strain and building a lot of resentment in you, the person who's asking the question, because you're the one who has all the burden of financial risk and responsibility in the relationship, and it's not like, you know, you're financially fully independent. And that working is something else other than contributing to the household income. So those are my assumptions. I think the one thing that's important in every relationship, and you can apply it to this or other situations, is that there's a balance of freedom and accountability in relationships. People need to feel free to live a life that they want, but they also need to understand that if they're part of a couple, there is an accountability to that couple. So I would have a conversation with him. You cannot let this resentment build upon you. It will blow you up. It will destroy the marriage. It will cause a lot of angst in you, even if it doesn't destroy the marriage. And just really speak about the fact that you want this relationship to be more balanced. You know, you're not taking away anybody else's freedom, but there is an accountability, and you're hoping that you work through the strain that you're feeling in an equitable way. And ask why. You know, I made a whole bunch of assumptions as to why your husband isn't bringing in income. Make sure that you understand why he's not working as well. And that'll open up some honesty between you, and then you can take it to the next step. You know, if it gets to the point where there is no empathy between you, then you would probably need to go for couples counseling, and perhaps the relationship might not be the right one for either of you at this point in time, but there are so many steps before then.
100%. I have seen so many marriages, so many relationships look so many different ways. The other thing that I would offer on this question is you get to make this up. this is 2021. It's almost 2022. So you could have a female, because it's a female questioner, you could have a female be the breadwinner and the male do all of the work on the home front. That's possible.
Yeah.
I had a friend, this is about 10 years ago, and she was a very senior executive, and she was common law with a guy, and they just said, he's not going to work. And she got a lot of blowback in our culture. This is a decade ago. She got a lot of blowback in our culture because it was okay for a man to do that. It was not okay for a man to receive that or to navigate that and not work in the eyes of a lot of people around her, but it worked for them. So I think there's something to be said that balance can look like this on money and look like this on laundry and shopping and home care, whatever. Balance can be really navigated in the context of a couple. I want to talk about one other technique from a therapeutic standpoint, Moira, and that is this idea of goal setting. So financial advisors talk about goals, but they're often retirement oriented, not super relevant or resonant to someone who's, in their 20s or so. But therapists have been using goals in lots of different ways and lots of different issues for a long time. Can you bring that into the debt stress context?
Interestingly, goals-based financial planning is getting a bit of a bad reputation these days, in part because it frequently isn't sufficiently flexible to represent, I don't think this will be a newsflash to anybody on the call, but you ever notice that family life is a lot harder when you're the adult than when you're the kid? Yeah, it's rough. But that being said, something that seems pretty rudimentary, like it would be a good goal to get out of debt or to address, to get on a financial wellness train. It's hard to be the light of the world, as we say, when you can't pay the electricity bill. So establishing not only the goal for yourself, but also a flexible way to get there that doesn't kill you in the process. If you've ever worked with a for-profit credit counseling agency, my goodness, some of those are predatory and not kind at all. And they add to stress. They do not relieve it. So finding a way to make sure that your goal, whatever it is matched with a process for achieving it that takes into account the complexity and the messiness of life, and the fact that nobody does well when they are so ragged and so close to the edge of cope and don't cope.
The goal setting thing, it's so can be for people so grounding to just have their marching orders and something to focus on. It's almost like the emergency preparedness thing that you have on flights. I don't know what that's called, the safety announcement or whatever. When you sit on the flight, I find that I'm calmer having read the little pamphlet and watched the little video because I have a plan. So I know if we're going down, I'm putting the oxygen mask on and I'm, doing the thing. And that for people who are dealing with debt stress, to have some sort of a plan, it puts them back in the driver's seat in some way. I want to come back to Paula, some of the other techniques. So there are ones that, are kind of cliche, self-care. I made the joke about taking a bath and all that stuff. But what would you say about self-care? What would you say about gratitude? What actually works that is more than just what Oprah Winfrey talked about in her magazine last issue? And I love Oprah. I did a show on Oprah's network. I love Oprah. She's amazing.
I think what works, and it works in terms of achieving goals, but it also works in terms of achieving goals in a manner that's helpful for your emotional and mental well-being, which is kind of important as well. And it really kind of builds on what you both said in terms of just having a plan or a process. I kind of liken it to if somebody wants to lose weight and they go on starvation diets, and they are erratic in how they are trying to accomplish it, and they're not building anything into their lives that allow them to feel that sense of mastery or accomplishment, because the process is so painful, then you've already set yourself up for failure. We need to have those wonderful milestones, like when we're kids and we're learning how to walk, and we need to have that little recognition when you get that gold star. And kids and adults are not all that different. Doing things, setting up a process so you know that every day or every week you're doing the right thing. You're paying down your debt, you're putting around emergency savings. Those small incremental things give you a little bit of a boost because you are moving in the right direction, and then it ultimately leads to your goal. So that type of thing, to make sure that you have that achievement and you have that sense of control, is very important along this path. And it is very nourishing from an emotional and mental well-being point of view as well.
Moira, your practice includes a lot of work with families. So I'm going to give this next question to you. My children will never be able to get into the housing market in the city of Toronto. My 23-year-old is asking for help with the down payment. I read all sorts of articles about the bank of mom and dad, and I don't think this is the right thing for me to do as a parent. Now I feel the guilt and stress that I will be the reason that my son doesn't succeed. Thoughts?
Oh, mercy.
I know.
Well, let me just say to that person that you are not responsible for the global financial economy. I mean, you may be good and you may be powerful, but you're not all that. And just like that analogy of your airplane story, Bruce, you cannot help your child by putting yourself at financial risk, by putting your own future at financial risk. Your child has a whole lot more runway ahead of him or her financially than you do. So that's an issue. I think, there are different ways of helping adult children. And sometimes that involves, having frank discussions, letting them off the hook with respect to the notion of having to buy a house. Who said that that's the mark of happy and successful adulthood? I know it
was actually commandment number 11. I think it was a revision recently. It's a number 11 now.
No, number 11 didn't make it. I think that's a real thing that parents have hangups about, and we've got to free our children to look at that differently. I think that we're at a point where some of what we can do is to be advocating for, say, national housing policy. When, back when God was wearing short pants and I was a girl, there was a federal housing strategy. And I think we do need to be thinking about this in very serious terms again. But the mark of successful adulthood for your 23-year-old is to be adaptable to the circumstances that person is facing. And so if he wants a house, he's going to have to figure out, how can he earn enough? Does he need to go back to school? Does he need to be looking at co-housing? If this is his goal, he's not allowed to dictate that you meet the goal for him.
And even in a circumstance where the parent could afford it, because some parents almost have an easier route when they completely can't afford it. It's almost easier, a little harder when they could, if they extended themselves, and a hard dynamic when you've got the money, you just don't feel that it's right. Yeah. I want to, this parenting thing, Paula, is debt stress is really connected to parenting because there can be a tremendous amount of guilt here. So the parent who, maybe it's not at the level of a house down payment, it's rep hockey. How do I fund rep hockey? How do I, pay for the daycare and the sitters and still, fill in the blank here? Any wisdom for the guilt connection to debt stress?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've been talking about is when we're comparing ourselves to others and some random standard. So the person before was talking about, well, I'm seeing in news reports that, well, who says that that is normal or good or healthy or whatever? And even some of the other things, I've got my kids in all sorts of different things because my neighbors' kids are in all sorts of different things. I think we have to really kind of take a step back and say, what's important in my family? What was important to my kids? What do they need? Teaching your kids the ability to prioritize is such a gift. It will help their stress and help their lives tremendously. The other thing is being honest about finances. If your family cannot afford X for whatever reason, then say that we just don't have the funds to do it. Maybe we can problem solve around it together. If your child is of the age, a part-time job or something that helps them build that sense of accomplishment as opposed to a sense of just being taken care of. I mean, a parent's responsibility is to take care of a child's basic needs, make sure that they have as much opportunity as what you can give them, and make sure that they feel comfortable and safe. Beyond that, it's negotiable, and you need to actually show your children that life means some choices, and that doesn't mean that it's a bad life.
Yeah. Another area in which there is a lot of lived experience for people are new immigrants to Canada. So Moira, I'm going to ask this one of you. I'm a new immigrant to Canada. I've lived here in Canada for a few years, and I find myself incredibly stressed about not achieving a financial freedom that has never been part of my life priorities to begin with. What do I do? And I love this because it connects to the different cultural norms that exist in other parts of the world, that once we move here, or even if we're raised here, we live like this is the right way to do it.
Wow, I would love to have that person on the show as a guest. Because, is there any topic that more rapidly uncovers values, right? Even back to that, one of those first questions about how money equals safety, or money equals trouble, or money equals fill in the blank. So in North American culture, we are known to be a consumer culture. We are known to be sort of status conscious based on what it is, how it is we look, and what it is that we do. Asian cultures are often much more savings focused. There are certain groups, Indigenous groups, for example, are much more characterized by a sharing ethos and ethic. And so part of the immigrant's journey is to hold on to the best part of their culture as they figure out what does it mean to survive in the one that they've adopted.
Paula, I want to ask, so we've been doing like a who, what, when, where, why, and how. I want to focus on the when here and ask you, when should someone really get serious about addressing their debt stress? And I'll say from a nonprofit credit counseling perspective, how we think about it is, first of all, overall, if you're feeling stressed, you should give us a call. But second, and more pronounced, is if you were late. If you were late paying your bills, you need to pick up the phone and we're going to help you figure something out, something out. Not a hard and fast rule, but it's a benchmark. If you find yourself late, you certainly should give us a call. What would you provide as like a whoops, you need to be in touch or get focused on this? What would be the questions you would ask, or what would be the circumstance that you would say, this needs to be job number one for you?
Well, it's one of these things that you can never, ever, 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 ever say to yourself, well, it's not quite bad enough. At the first moment that there's something that feels uncomfortable, you aren't able to make a payment. And as you said, just picking up the phone or sending an email or getting some coaching, making sure that you are in control. Not waiting until it is difficult for you to feel that control. Like that is absolute job number one. And you were saying, when you should start. I would start before getting into debt. Like if you have the possibility of going into debt, if you don't have a way to sort of amass emergency savings, if you are on that edge, then that's an opportunity to get coaching to prevent yourself from going into that more difficult point. So really, just like any other health, financial health, invest in prevention before you get into a difficult place. And if you feel anything causing you angst, deal with it right at the very beginning, because that early control will pay off in spades.
Moira, what would you say to build on that? The when it goes, for me, one of the things that reminds me of are conversations where people are like, oh, it's not so bad. It's like that scene in Monty Python when his arm gets severed and then his leg gets severed and then his other leg gets severed. And he's hopping around saying, oh, it's just a flesh wound. And, for a lot of people carrying this burden of debt stress, for the three of us, given what we do for a living, we're like, you need to take action on that. And they're, la, 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 la. What do you think, Moira?
Sure. So some of the signs, Bruce, right? If your beacon score is below 600, if you are always in overdraft, if you are not, certainly if you're not making minimum payments, and if you're not on track to pay things off, then there's the relational ones. We know that marital fights about money are associated with nastier fighting techniques and poorer relationship outcomes than our fights about any other topic,
including infidelity.
Yeah.
What? Horrifying.
Which is not licensed to just go mess around. You don't because there's a hierarchy here.
You can have a second family in Argentina with a couple of kids, no problem. But if you miss the credit card payment, that's grounds for divorce.
That's right. We know that financial stress seems to have like this particular homing device for sleep. So if your sleep is getting messed because you're fretful, we know that it's associated with, if you are juggling, if you are robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you are going out without medications as you try to pay for, a car repair, these are the kinds of things that indicate that you are not making it. And the kindest thing that you can do for your life is to create some financial ease, which becomes one of the ways in which you get to fullness of life more broadly. It's not all there is, absolutely not. It won't magically fix everything, but it's just one of those things that kind of provides, it's like trying to launch a rocket off a spongy base of the Everglades. They launch rockets in the Everglades, all right, but it's on really well reinforced cement pads. And so for me, that's what the meaning of money is in life, is it's this launching pad to get to other things in life.
I love that you use the phrase, the kindest thing. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. All right, we're going to wrap up with a call to action. And I'm going to buy an extra 30 seconds for each of you to think about what your call to action will be. And I'm going to go first. So, we've got people in this conversation tonight from across this country, from all sorts of financial circumstances, high income, middle income, low income, high levels of debt, low level, the whole spectrum. If something about this resonated for you and you want to take action, certainly if you're late on your debts, you need to go to creditcanada.com. You need to book an appointment or just call us on the 1-800 number, and a counselor is going to answer your call and they're going to talk about your options. And I think the perception that we have to continue to deal with or address is people feel hopeless. It's never hopeless. There's always options. So they're going to help you. Our counselors are going to help you with a debt consolidation program. They're going to make a referral to a licensed insolvency trustee. They're going to counsel you on basic budgeting. They're going to register you in one of our webinars. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. So my call to action would be go to our website, book a call, and talk to one of our people. Paula, what's your call to action? People have attended. This is an action in and of itself. They're here. they've lasted the entire hour. What would you say people should brush themselves off and do?
Don't let any perception or feeling of stigma get in the way of you taking care of yourself. Your financial well-being is such a core part of your overall well-being, your sense of comfort, confidence, your future, your ability to enjoy your life and your mental health. And 1 in 4 of us is in a difficult place at any given time. So the feeling of isolation that people feel often prevents them from taking that first step, one of which Bruce just mentioned. Don't let that get in your way.
Love it. Moira, for you.
If you could only have one thing in your life to deal with stress, if it all boiled down to just one thing that you could carry with you, the research says that one thing is other people. Other people matter. And they matter because of all kinds of different ways that they help with our stress, because they offer hugs, because they offer encouragement, because they make connections for us, they make referrals, they hook us up with the right people. In the world of therapy and the world of recovery, there is this saying that we're only as sick as our secrets. And as soon as we say to people, you know what, I don't have it all together, but I want help in getting there. It seems like when you take one step towards that, the universe takes 10 steps towards you. And that's, that sounds a little woo-woo for a neuropsychologist who likes to talk about evidence-based, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, but it just seems to work that way.
Yeah. I love the woo-woo. I love double-blind research, but I love the woo-woo. And I am so grateful to the two of you for joining us tonight. I'm really grateful. If we were in a live room, we would have a wondrous round of applause. So instead, we'll do the Zoom applause. Dr. Moira Somers from Winnipeg, Paula Allen here in Toronto from LifeWorks. Thank you both so very much for joining us in our event tonight. We're so grateful. I also want to thank our platinum sponsor, Home Equity Bank. I mentioned them off the beginning of our event. They are the provider of the CHIP reverse mortgage, and they've really stepped up here and supported us with our Financial Literacy Month efforts. Thank you for making the time tonight to engage in this topic. We really hope that it provided some value for you as you work to de-stress your debt and find calm, find calmness, find truth, and find action. Have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.